Good morning, Andre from Peak Motorcycles here. I'm going for a test ride today, and today I'm heading up to Triumph World in Chesterfield to ride the new 1200 Tiger. I normally record my intros in a lay-by or somewhere on the way, but as the road is closed today, the normal way out of Edale, and I'm having to come down Winnets, which is a pass that goes down into Castleton, I thought I'd record it here instead because it really is quite stunning to look at. So I'm quite looking forward to riding the Triumph 1200. So I'd always looked at one before whenever replacement time came up for my GS, and I was always tempted, but sometimes you just stick with what you know, and it wasn't different enough to persuade me. I did ride the Tiger 900 last time, which was pretty close actually. That was a bike I really liked, but in the end, I went safe. Maybe I'm a creature of habit, and I stuck with my 1200 or 1250 GS. This new iteration is definitely different. It's lighter, it's got more power. Might even be a GS Beta, so I'm going along there to have a look to see what I think. Now ideally I suppose I would have done this on my GS, and unfortunately that is currently with my van being fitted out, so they can make sure it can carry at least a GS in the right way. So instead I'm going on my Scram. It's absolutely nothing like the GS and nothing like the Tiger 1200, but I've done about 700 miles on my GS in the last couple of weeks, going over to Ireland for the ABR Ireland Rally, and just pottering around. So it's enough in my mind. It's the bike I've ridden more than any other bike lately, so I think I'm still in a good place to do that comparison, even if I haven't ridden the 15 miles to the dealer on it. So yeah, that's it. I'll start recording again when I get there, and I'll tell you what I think. Hi there, so I'm here at the dealer, here at Triumph World in Chesterfield. This is the bike behind me that I'm going to be riding. So I'll give you a quick look around that. It has just started raining, so I think what I might do is I might actually just crack on the ride, and hopefully the rain will have stopped when I get to somewhere suitable to give you a proper look at it. So this is the bike. It's the new Triumph Tiger 1200. This is the GT Pro variant with the cast wheels, more of the sort of the touring-y one, I guess, rather than the adventure-y one. So it's got the regular tank, it's got the electronic suspension, lots of bells and whistles, and this rain is getting heavier, so I'm going to put this camera away and get on the bike. So would you know it, as soon as you get on the bike and you get all your stuff on, the rain looks like it's going to stop. Anyway, I'm here now, so I'm going to go and ride for a bit, tell you what I think, give you my first impressions, then I'll stop somewhere and give you a proper look around. First thoughts, I've got the seat on the high setting. It did feel reasonably high to get on. It's got a 20mm adjustment, which is very similar to I think what I have on my GS. I'll show you how that works when I stop. Other thoughts just from being here, the screen goes up and down. It's just on a number of different stops. I'm going to have it on its highest position just because it is raining, and maybe it'll keep me a little bit drier. I will drop it down later on. So now let's have a look at the dash. That one's got a bit of dust on it, but give that a bit of a wipe before we set off. Some of that might be raindrops. There we go, and here we go. So first button, push it once and the bike wakes up. You hear the fuel pump running. You get a Triumph logo, you get, a nice Tiger picture. So this looks very similar to the 1200 RR. There we go, and yeah, the dash. So a few things on that. That's the standard view. There's a little joystick over here, which will take it through various things. There's a home button here that will give you a quick sort of flip back between the full thing and another screen. And then to start it up, I'm just going to pull in the clutch and push the button. Yeah, so that sounds kind of cool. So this bike does have this the Triumph T-plane firing sequence, which makes it behave apparently a bit more like a twin, even though it is a triple. But you can definitely get the smoothness of that triple. It doesn't feel like my GS does just on startup. So here we go. Let's go for a ride. So very first thought is that it does feel quite revvy compared to my GS, and maybe that's the triple. Seems to be a bit of dive on that front end, this bike does have the electronic suspension. So I can get out around there we go, and we're off. It also has the quick shifter up and down. It's got heated grips. It doesn't have the heated seat, but it does seem to have pretty much everything else. First thoughts, it feels like quite a small light bike. That comes as a real surprise. Now I saw the press release and the launch from the bike show, where they talked about where all the weight saving was being made, and when I looked at the specs on paper, I thought, well, that's still kind of a pretty heavy bike. So I wasn't entirely sure what that would be like. But I don't know whether it's big. The bars seem to be, you know, quite close to me. I think it is about the same size as my GS, but I think the geometry must just be slightly different. This is a good thing. I mean, it doesn't feel like it's actually a small bike, but it just, considering how big it is, I think it feels smaller than it is. That's probably a good thing. Even just, you know, getting it round, you know, a few little corners and getting out onto the road, it seemed to be very, very easy to ride, which again was a surprise. Now, I've got the seat on the highest setting. If it was on the lowest setting and you're a shorter rider and you don't have quite as much contact with the ground as you'd like when you're manoeuvring it, I think that would make quite a big difference. That engine, I don't know if you can just hear it, it's almost like it is a bit like the sort of the cackle of a twin. Just that bit there, you can hear that. I don't know whether that's something vibrating. Is that the screen? No, I think that is the engine. Which is, I actually quite like that characteristic. Now, I know people that have had the previous Tiger 1200 for whom the T-plane crank really isn't their sort of thing. But from someone coming from a GS, I actually quite like that. One thing that I have noticed sort of quite quickly is that the front end dive is significantly more than on my GS. Now, this bike does have the electronic suspension, as does my GS, so I'd expect them to be, well, comparable, but I know that the GS has got is it the power lever front end, or is that the tele lever? Anyway, one of the levers rather than a conventional sprung fork, and I think this is a conventional sprung fork, so maybe that affects the handling characteristics a little bit. But then again, you know, this is an adventure bike. It's certainly not bad, it's just different. So yeah, I'll see how I got on with that across the ride. But over these sorts of roads, yeah, it feels fine. That sort of smallness that it feels like just lends itself to little country lanes. Now, I rode here on my Scram, which, yeah, is a pretty small bike and is much slower, and was fun on these country lanes. And sometimes I'm almost inclined to take a smaller bike out if I'm riding around the Peak District than my GS, just because for tiny little roads with low speeds, you don't need all that extra. This does feel like quite a small bike. I've only been riding a short way, and I'm now going through a 30-mile-an-hour area through a village, and what I have noticed is that this engine is so tractable in pretty much any gear. You know, I mean, it's a big old block, but even, you know, fourth gear, if you forget to change down, doesn't really matter. That's just a tiny twist of the right throttle from 20 miles an hour, and off it'll go, and you give it a few more beans and you're at 30 before you know it. I guess I wouldn't expect anything different from a big engine like this, but the way that the gearing's been done and the tuning of the engine, I mean, I'm not really touching the rev range at all, and as you can see. But actually, you know what, let me try this in fifth, that might be more fun. So from 26 miles an hour, hitting the 50 limit, and you get that lovely sort of throb and thud that comes off the back, and before you know it, and that's just in one gear. You know, it's definitely lazy riding if you know, you don't need to work the engine very hard to get it to do almost anything. And fourth is even more. So yeah, big fan of this 1200 T-plane engine. I'm coming back up that same road that I came down, and it's got gravel all over it. I did wonder whether it would feel a little bit hesitant on this, or whether I'd have an occasional traction control light coming on or something like that. But you know what? It's almost like it's not there. It just feels really, really easy to ride. Oh, apparently I have a fuel low. I'll put a little bit in before I get it back. One thing I did wonder about is the height of the screen. So this screen is on the highest level. I'm reasonably tall and I've got the seat in the highest position, but it didn't feel like it was that far up. You know, I've definitely got a very clear view of the road ahead, but I wondered whether that meant there was less wind protection. Now, I'll be doing a bit of motorway towards the end where I can test that properly, but for now, actually it's been great. I've hardly noticed what little rain there was, and actually just when I stop here before I pull out, I'm just going to drop that into the lowest position to see how bad it is low down. There we go. No idea how I clear that. Oh, there we go, that's how you clear the fuel light. You just tap the little joystick thing. So now we're heading into the Peak District. So I'm just going to do a little loop. It's not the normal loop I would have done because one of the roads is closed, but there's a bit of 60-mile-an-hour country lane just coming up, and then there's a bit where previously I've ridden to test out suspension on bikes, and then I'll come back round, do a bit of city riding in Sheffield on my way back in, and then lastly a bit of dual carriageway to get back to the dealership. So I put that screen down and already I can feel that there's a lot more wind coming through. I don't know if you can also hear that on the mic, but it does feel a bit like I'm riding a naked bike. But the bike certainly feels, this sounds like a silly word, but playful. That lightness and smallness that I mentioned has definitely translated through. Now with that screen in the lower position, I'm getting it is a lot more blustery, but in hot weather I can see that being a good thing. On a day like this today, that does feel quite exposed. So much so that I'm actually just going to pull over in this lay-by and drop that up. Now I don't know if you could see that there, but that was quite a lot of dive on the fork just for slowing down from what was a fairly low speed. Right, I'm just going to knock that back up again because I think the video will be easier to hear. Right, let's see what it's like at 60. Which we'll almost do in first. You know, it is a proper quick engine that. I kept kind of looking down just to see how I was doing on the rev range, but this actually feels like quite a fun bike to ride at speed. Slow down a little, there we go. So yeah, that was a lot of fun, and I think maybe that's where it's maybe even better than the GS. I mean, I know GS is fun to ride in a spirited way, but actually I think that was more fun. Then again, fun is very subjective. What one person likes and somebody else doesn't is quite different. But yeah, that's just in sixth, just a bit of a twist to the wrist and it just takes off. You certainly feel like you're riding this bike. You know, there's a very dynamic feeling to it when you're on it, and I think that is definitely going to be a bonus. So here on the left is where I'd normally go. I'd take the road down to Froggatt Edge and then come up and round, but they seem to be doing roadworks everywhere at the moment, so that one is a no-go today. So just riding down now into the Hope Valley, which you can see over on that side. Down here there's a sharp right turn which will take you on the road back up to Burbage. So I'll go up there. There's a lay-by just up there. It has stopped raining now, which is nice. So I will do my walk around the bike and give you a closer look at some of the features that are on it. So I've just ridden up the first bit, and yeah, I quite like this bike. The front suspension is probably the only thing that's really stood out to me as being, you know, significantly different to my GS. But the engine I really like, and just for how small and light the bike feels, I think it's, yeah, I mean, I did wonder whether it was just marketing blurb when they came out with it, you know, trying to make out the bike was significantly lighter. I've ridden the old one once, but yeah, this does feel like a small and light bike, and it isn't, you know, it is heavy, you know, it's a big adventure bike, and it's not small, it's enormous. But yeah, first thoughts are this is really good. So I'll just give you a bit more of a close look at it now. So just starting at the back end, it's got this Triumph hugger on there. The tail tidy is nice enough. I mean, there is a lot of plastic on there, but yeah, it's fine. I quite like the look of the back end of that exhaust. It's a stock exhaust. It's you know, they're never a thing of beauty, and this one is no exception. But actually, that looks all right. You can see there's the big cap collector down underneath there. So it's got Brembo brakes at the back. That looks like a fair-sized disc for the rear of a bike like this. The tyres are Metzeler Torrance Next, which I do like. Looking at the actually on the frame itself, there's so many of these parts, like the you know, even just like the pedal, which has had a lot of thought gone into it. It looks like it's not just a piece of steel they've bunged on. This one does come with a bit of a protector for the exhaust down underneath there, but not really a bash guard. But it is the GT Pro version, so it's the road version. Having said that, it does have this big crash bar on the front. It also has the spotlights in there, which are nicely tucked out of the way. Big Brembo floating discs at the front. It does have a beak, but then nearly every adventure bike these days has a beak. It's got that big Triumph headlamp with a daytime lamp as well as high and low beams. This one does have these optional indicators, which are the moving indicators in the direction of travel. The screen is in the highest position that it comes at the moment. And then if I come round on this side, yeah, everything looks pretty good. Starting at the back of the bike, we have the seat there. We do have this big cylinder on the side, I don't know if you can see that, and I think that's for the electronic suspension. Not sure if that's the best place to put it, sticking out, extending out beyond the frame there. I don't know whether that's a risk. but I'm sure they've thought that through, even if it does look a bit odd. I suppose the pillion peg hanger down there is going to come into contact long before the suspension does, but I guess if that part snaps off, then that is exposed. There's two seats. There's a pillion seat and a separate rider's seat. Now what I just want to quickly show you, if I just take the seat off, there you go, it's just a keyhole under there. Pillion seat comes off, so I don't know if you can see that easily. And then the rider's seat, there's a little lever just in there, so I'm just going to knock that forwards. It's quite hard to do one-handed. See if I can just pull that out, there we go. So the rider's seat comes off. You want to see all the gubbins under there. The battery's, I guess, as lowish, sort of underneath the seat. And that is quite a big height. If you look at that sideways on, just how far down that is. I mean, it's literally sitting just on top of the rear suspension. What I wanted to show you on the back of the seat was this. So there's basically this bar which can be moved from that position and then just drop down there, and then the same at the front. You can see in there, that's the seat in the high position, and you can just pop this bar out from there and put it in there. It's just on a bit of rubber that hooks around the back there. Unhook that, drop it in, and that is a 20mm up or down seat height adjustment. So I'm not sure how short you need to be or how short your legs need to be on the lower seat, but if you're looking around for a big touring bike and you're a bit shorter in the leg, then I think certainly trying one of these just with a low seat, without having to touch the suspension, might be worth doing. There's a door in here. What do we think's inside there? Oh, there we go. Oh, so that's a nice little touch. So just inside the back of here, there is actually a USB socket in what looks like a waterproof box with a seal around it. So yeah, that is quite a nice feature. I didn't know that was there. I mean, it does feel a little bit flimsy. I'm not sure I'd take that through a river. But yeah, nice that it's there. One thing I can see under here as well is there's this 12-volt socket, which if you've got any heated gear, that's useful. I'm guessing that's where the switch would be for the heated rear pillion seat if you used it. Coming up to the front, there is another 12-volt socket just in here if you've got anything you want to run at the front of the bike. And just to give you another proper look at the dash, so here we have these, they're not beautiful mirrors, but they do the job. The controls here on the left side, particularly having the heated grip button in there, is quite nice. This is the sort of the joystick for going through the screens. We've got cruise control, we've got all the normal toys you'd expect on a bike like this. Coming over to the other side, we have this home button, which is what puts you back to the full display. The same start button that was on the 1200RR. And then on the top we have a lock button on the top, and then the blinkers. So let's give you one more look at the dash. So to make it go, first of all you just tap it on, and that starts up the computer. Get a Triumph logo and a nice picture of the bike. Oh yeah, and that fades in, and then to start it you drop that down, you hear the pump prime. What I'm not going to do just at the moment is actually start it. So yeah, it's all of this is done through the joystick in here with my left thumb. But yeah, it's got display settings, bike settings, trip settings for the built-in sat-nav. And the Bluetooth seems to be able to control everything, including navigation, music, phone, SMS, even GoPro controls. I've found that actually leaving the GoPros in a state where they can be controlled by Bluetooth means the batteries don't last for that long, so I'm not sure really how practical that is. But it's there, that's definitely a thing above and beyond what I get on my BMW at the moment. And the screen is really nice, it's just really nice quality. It's quite high resolution. How close I can get where you can actually see that. Okay, so that's enough of looking at the bike. I'm going to get back on it and carry on riding. So I get to go up over the tops, up over here, over towards Sheffield. I'll drop down, and then there's a bit of city riding. I'll head back to a dual carriageway, so I will get some high-speed running at 70, just to let you know what that's like. I'm going to leave the screen in the high position, because it does seem, it's a bit blustery today, as you can probably hear. If I cover the mic, maybe that will pick it up better. So yeah, I'm just going to ride back to the dealer, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. Right, looking forward to getting back on this bike and riding over some twisty lanes. So this particular bit of road I quite often use for a suspension test, because it looks quite smooth, but it's actually pretty bumpy. I don't know if you can actually tell that from how the bike is moving, but so far this suspension actually is coping, better than most up here. That soft front end that I mentioned, where I was experiencing a bit more dive under braking, certainly seems to be absorbing everything up here. I mean, if you want to get a measure for what the as the Royal Enfield Interceptor suspension was like, especially with someone as heavy as me on it, to come up here and you really do get shaken around all over the place. But yeah, let's see what it's like. So I'm basically heading up there, up to what is an old Bronze Age fort. And yeah, over this bit, you know, you can see the bike is moving, but that suspension is just eating all of that up really, really well. Yeah, no, that is this bit, yeah, a few more bumps, but it's just really confidence inspiring. Some bikes, this road will just shake all over the place, and yeah, I know it's not a smooth flat tarmac like it looks, so that's kind of why it's useful as a place to test it. But on here, I think this might even be the best bike that I've been up here on. So if I give it a bit, yeah, that is easily coping with it. And by that I mean it is just gliding. I'm getting a little bit of shake from some of the bumps, and even there, under that front braking, I did find the bike diving a bit. But maybe that's the trade-off. You know, you have that extra, you know, some softer suspension at the front end, which means that it does dive, but it also means that when you get on rougher roads, it just copes a lot more easily. So now coming down the hill, you can see Sheffield in the distance. And one of the questions I was hoping to answer for myself from this test ride was, is this a replacement for my GS? Now, I've been a 1200 GS liquid cooled owner since 2013. My first bike was a 2013, I then swapped that for a 2017, and then in 2020 I swapped that for a 1250. And I know they're not everyone's cup of tea, I know they're not everyone's idea of a good looking bike, but I've been really pleased with mine. I've had one engine fail on the original one, so you know, the reliability isn't maybe what some people think, but BMW are good enough to replace it under goodwill, even though it's out of warranty. There's the ongoing exhaust flap problem with them, which needs a whole exhaust replacement unless they do it under goodwill, which I've had done once. Having said that, with the 1250 I haven't had any problems at all. It's just been a good bike. Which then leads me to the question of what would tempt me away. Would this bike tempt me away? I don't think the old 1200 Tiger was, you know, was enough. I think it was just a bit too heavy, and when I rode it, it didn't do it for me. Everyone's different though, and I know they sold a lot of them. This one, yeah, it's really good. I'm now slightly conflicted. I kind of thought that maybe I wouldn't. I thought, you know what, it's they've done a few tweaks. Have they made it good enough? I'm going to go straight instead of following that guy. But yeah, but it is very, very good. I mean, I didn't really expect anything less, to be honest. There are really no bad bikes out there. The character of this 1200 triple is quite different to the 1250 Boxer, but it's different. It's not better or worse. I guess it's what you like. Now, I know there's probably some people that have come from other Triumph triples who don't actually like the whole T-plane firing sequence, because you buy a triple because you want a triple, you don't buy a triple because you want it to feel like a twin. But you know, everyone's different, everyone likes different things. I must admit, I quite like this. So on the one hand, it's talking about would I replace it, and then it's whether I would actually do it when it came to it. I'm not disappointed with my GS at all. I do think this is really good. So I think for me it would probably come down to price. So it's, you know, whenever I've been into, you know, whenever I've traded up my outgoing GS and replaced it with a new one, BMW have always, you know, seen me right. They've given me a really good price for the trade-in. They've moved all my accessories from one bike to the next without charge. And for all those bits, yeah, it means that if I walk into a Triumph dealer and look to trade up, that they have to use the book value for the GS, which might make it less competitive. I suppose I could always sell it privately. That's always an option. Or, given that my GS is, you know, quite low mileage, maybe I just keep it for a few more years and then exchange it. So I have the R1250 GS Rally, which I guess the equivalent contender might be the Rally Pro from Triumph. I'm not that interested in the Adventure models. I know they've got this bigger fuel tank and bigger range and bigger everything, but yeah, you know, until I get a bladder that can go 300 miles, I don't really need a bike that can do 300 miles. So I think for a while, or for now at least, that's not enough of a reason for me to shift. Having said that, I think that when next year comes around and it's either trade up, decide to keep, or replace for my GS, then this will absolutely be on the list. My local dealer doesn't have a Rally Pro into test ride at the moment, which I guess would have been my preferred comparison, but they will get one, and I look forward to riding that back to back with this and with my GS. One thing that is more noticeable on this bike compared to my GS is the fly-by-wire throttle. So for example, if I just apply the brakes, I can kind of feel the electronic throttle just slowing the bike, you know, not just on the brakes but also just tempering the engine to what the rest of the bike is doing. It's not a bad thing, it's just something that I've noticed which I hadn't previously noticed on my GS or other bikes. In fact, my CB1000R also has a fly-by-wire throttle. So I'm just coming on to the A61 Chesterfield bypass now, which will take me back to the dealers. So this is an opportunity to wind the bike up to 70, see what it's like for cruising. So I do have the windscreen still in the highest position, so this is as much protection as I'm going to get. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it behaves. I know that these are done as adventure bikes, where of course everyone's going to be crossing rocky riverbeds in the Himalayas, but a lot of them just get used as touring bikes. I know that that's pretty much what I use my GS for, and if I was to replace it with this, it would kind of be the same. These Torrance Next tyres, they are very much, I think they're probably 90-10 road tyre. So yeah, easy up through the gears, quick shifter. It also has a bipper for going down. Well, there we go, 70 miles an hour. I'm getting quite a lot of wind off the top of the screen. I don't know if you can hear that in my helmet. Certainly more than I would be getting off my GS, and I think it's just because the screen is that much lower. Now, screens are easy to replace, but I think at the very least, if I was going to ride this long distances at these sorts of speeds, I would need to have a wing on the top of there. I suppose the other option is I put the seat down and that drops me another inch lower down into the bike, which will also help. And I could also ride these speeds in a helmet that doesn't have a peak. But right now that is quite noisy. I am feeling quite a lot of wind blast coming off the top of it. The bike itself feels very serene though. You know, there's no buzzing, even with that T-plane crank. Sixth gear is barely being stretched. You know, at 70 I'm doing about 4,000 revs, and being a triple it's just that bit smoother than the twin, so I'm not really feeling anything through there. One thing I have noticed as this ride has gone on is that I think I could do with my hands being slightly higher. That's not a criticism of the bike. I'm 6'1", and this bike wasn't made for people who are 6'1". They probably made it for someone who's slightly shorter. And you know what? I have the same with my GS, so I have some risers on my GS that just make the handlebar position a little bit better. I also have a wing on top of the screen of my GS, so yeah, maybe that as well is another factor that makes you know, that just adapts it for someone who's a little bit taller like myself. But as a motorway bike, this is fine. I mean, I think this is like I said, this is what it will be used for by a lot of people, and in that regard it is extremely capable. What I think I do need to look at is, if I look down either side of the dash, it's significantly narrower. It does seem to go very wide around the tank and where the crash bars are, but the bit around the screen looks narrower than my GS. I don't know whether the GS just pushes more wind out to the side. Now, I know that for a lot of people, just continually comparing it to the GS will be annoying, and I can only apologise to you. That is very much my point of reference, and you know, I think that's probably what Triumph are angling at. You know, there's plenty of other offerings that have come up lately. You know, there's the V-Stroms and the Africa Twin and the KTM Super Adventure. You know, all sorts of other adventure bikes out there in this sort of litre plus capacity. That, you know, that there is quite a range. For me, the GS is the class leader and has been for a while. It's also the bike that I've ridden the most of all of them, so that it really is what I compare it back to. So, you know, this is very much my opinion. I would always actively encourage anyone that's interested in one of these to go and ride one, because you will be the best person to decide if it's the right bike for you. I'm really enjoying this. I think this is a really good bike. I think it is potentially a GS beater, but it's close. You know, they're both really good at what they do, which is this sort of tourer adventure bike thing. So to pick one over the other, I think, is probably just going to come down to, you know, personal taste, maybe even cost. But honestly, I think there's not that much to choose between them. The difference might be that if you're trading up from a Triumph 1200, the old one, to this, then maybe this makes more sense, especially if some of the parts are interchangeable. If you're going from a GS, I don't know, I mean, maybe if you've got to buy all your accessories again, maybe it's not quite there. Even looking down at the handlebar clamp, I'm guessing that needs some special risers to lift that up, because the top clamp has actually got the bolts on a diagonal, so I'm guessing an aftermarket riser like the one I have in my GS wouldn't fit in there. I think the one I have is a Wunderlich riser that came from Germany, that's made specifically for the GS, that comes up and back. But looking at that clamp, yeah, that's not just going to take a riser as it comes. There's going to need either something from Triumph or someone to make something specific to this bike. And here we are back at the dealer. So I'm back at Triumph World in Chesterfield after my ride out on the Tiger 1200 GT Pro. It's a really good bike, really enjoyed riding it. Struggling to find anything negative to say about it, but you know, with these things, I think if I want to be really picky, there's probably a couple of little things. So handlebar position and the wind off the top of the screen, which can easily be fixed with risers and a little fin, and both problems were the same on my 1250 GS. I do find that the front suspension on the setting that I had it on was diving a little bit more, but compared to the power lever, telelever on the GS, that did feel different. But having said that, going up bumpy roads in the Peak District, I think this is one of the best sprung bikes I've ever ridden over something like that. The engine just wants to rev. I really like the character that you get. It does feel a bit like a twin with the feel of a triple. It doesn't have the engine braking of the Boxer, which I didn't notice that much, but thinking about particularly going up and down the gearbox, that did make a big difference. So yeah, I think they're great. If you've got a Triumph dealer nearby, I can definitely recommend taking a look and maybe taking one out for a test ride. I am looking forward to riding the Rally Pro version. Triumph World are going to have a Rally Pro Adventure coming in, which I guess is the GSA equivalent, with a big 30-litre tank and an astonishing 450-mile range. I think my bladder only does about 120 miles at the moment, so not sure how much use I get out of that. But nevertheless, I am going to have a go on that when it comes out, because I think that is going to be maybe the sort of bike that I'd actually consider replacing my GS with next year. Anyway, I hope this has been interesting and useful. If it has, maybe I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.